Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of Wrestling with Awareness. I'm your host, Vikram Prashar, and today I have a very special guest for you guys. He is a WWE veteran. He is one half of the longest reigning WWE NXT Tag Team Champions, and he is one half of the Awakening, aka the Ascension. Today we're going to wrestle the mind with Vic, aka Viktor. How are you doing today, man?
I'm good, brother. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well myself, kind of cold, February 2021. So as I said, we're recording this in February 2021, and I'd like to say 2021 has treated us pretty well so far. And for a lot of people, 2020 was a pretty difficult year. But I think when it comes to finding inner happiness and positivity, gratitude is very strong. So is there anything you're grateful for that came out of 2020?
I mean, everything really, like despite kind of not being able to work and do like the things that, both me and Konnor wanted to do, having all that put off, I mean, I got a lot of time just to work on myself, really, and just kind of, yeah, that's kind of the most important thing. I had a lot of time to just kind of sit with myself and kind of figure out where I'm going, what I'm doing, how to, be happy more or less in the world we're living in today. So, I'm pretty grateful for the fact that I'm actually just able to sit and be able to do that. I kind of live the dream right now.
Yeah, of course. Living the dream. And right before the pandemic, you and Big Kon did have the Awakening did have their first independent wrestling match over at Outlaw Wrestling. But you guys got a pretty big match coming up at Atomic Revolutionary Pro Wrestling, if I'm correct, against the Headbangers. How are you feeling going into that match?
Well, we just fought them last Friday. And it went to a no contest. Apparently, we just really dislike each other in the ring and couldn't be settled with normal rules. And I just kind of received word that we'll be back next month. Shoot, I should look it up real quick. But for a Falls Count Anywhere match, I'll just double check what the date is on it. It is March 19th is when the next one is. So, and that one's going to be on Fight TV. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's been a long time since both me and Big Kon have had a Falls Count Anywhere and despite my wrestling background, I really love those matches because and I think too, especially after the match we just had, that it's going to suit these two teams, us and the Headbangers a lot. And I think, we just kind of got a taste of each other at this last show with ARW. And I've got a good feeling that this next one is going to be something. It should be a real war between us. So I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And when a match does come down to a draw like that, usually the next one having a stipulation on it, like Falls Count Anywhere, no disqualification, anything goes really, that'll help us get a firm winner. So I'm really looking forward to that. Everybody check that out on Fight TV coming up very soon.
Yeah.
So you briefly talked about how you have a different wrestling background. Much like me, you're Canadian, and if I'm correct, you trained at the Heart Dungeon and spent some time in Stampede Wrestling. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, man, that was where I started. I was a 18-year-old kid that just moved from small town Alberta to the big city of Calgary to chase the dream of wrestling, and kind of the most legendary place, I believe. I don't know, still to this day, I don't know, to me, like I've come across a lot of other cool places, but I don't know, nothing's ever kind of been as legendary as Stu's Dungeon. And so, when I walked in there at 18 years old, I was pretty intimidated. But I just did a podcast with Duke Durango last night, and he reminded me of, this was really even before I got to know anybody. It was when I was still just starting out, and I think he said like, "Nice bump, Jesus," or something like that. And I guess I took the bump and I sat up and I just said, "Don't call me Jesus," and it went about whatever it was I was doing, because back then it was funny. People either called me that or they called me Satan. At that point in time of my life, I was leaning more towards the latter, I guess, with the way I looked, or even today, I suppose. But I definitely, it was like it was a great experience. Like I could never be more thankful or grateful for like all of the experience and people that I came across because of where I started. Like the dungeon was hard, unbelievably hard, but it taught me a lot of very valuable lessons that I carried with me, still to this very day, and it put me on a lot of the roads that took me to where I am now today. So I could never be more grateful for walking into such a terrifying place to learn from, and it was pretty awesome. Like I spent 7 years in Calgary, training and working with Stampede and doing all that. And, through that, like I'd met Tokyo Joe, who kind of upped the level for me, and like Tyson and Harry and like a few other guys, Natty and stuff like that. And so it was just such a great place to learn. Like we learned to wrestle, how to protect ourselves, you know what I mean, and how to take care of people that we're in the ring with, or learn how to deal with people that aren't taking care of you. So
yeah, of course.
Very good for all of those things, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a Canadian who's planning on entering the business, I'm curious, like, what are the chances you think that we could see like a member of the Hart family try to bring back the dungeon or maybe have something similar?
That's a good question. I don't know if any of the guys who probably like around with me, like even I don't think Harry's down there enough to do something like that. Like he'd probably be the one to do it, because if there was anyone that was going to reopen a dungeon, I'm sure it would be him. Because really that's his whole lifestyle is based around that mat,
Absolutely.
So like it wouldn't surprise me to see him do it. But I can't remember where he lives. He might even live here in Florida in the same city as me. I just haven't talked to him in a while to remember. So, and I know like I think Tyson and Natty, TJ and Natty definitely could, but I don't believe they're ever planning on moving back to Canada. So they were kind of like me, where once they got down here in the sun, they didn't want to leave either.
Yeah, growing up in Canada, I cannot blame them for that whatsoever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we talked about you training over at the dungeon, and it brought you very far in your career because you spent a while in the WWE alongside Big Kon. You're one half of the longest reigning NXT Tag Team Champions, and one of the foundations that laid the brick for what NXT has become today. How does it feel knowing that you are such a crucial part in like this monster that we have in NXT now?
I don't really have. It's funny to say. I don't really have any feeling about it, because the last 4 years that I spent, you know what I mean, in WWE, it was kind of told that nobody really cared. And, as important as it felt at the time, and I'm more than happy to see NXT where it is and stuff like that. I just never really feel like I was a part of those building blocks. And I'm not bitter about it. Like I've had to move past a lot of that kind of stuff, because even when we were there, it didn't feel like that's what we were doing. So much was kind of going on around us like that whole time in developmental. And like when I went from FCW to NXT, that wasn't our making, that was Hunter's making, and all the people that were, kind of there working with it. And really, like when the Performance Center opened and like NXT was starting to go full blown, it was awesome to be there to see the change in like crowds, our attendance, just the way it was growing. But it never felt like it was any part because of us, really. We were dealing so much with trying to keep our own heads above water, more or less, that it didn't seem like, as much as like we did have talks and stuff like, hey, you guys are building, this brand and stuff like that. But it didn't ever seem like that was the focus. You know what I mean? It was more or less, we were trying to survive and make it out. and make it to WWE. So now whenever I'm reminded about, that, I really have no feeling about it because like I said, I don't feel like any of that really rested on our shoulders. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was more or less so much dealing with us and making us what we became in NXT that it wasn't about building NXT, even though apparently that's kind of what we were doing.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And last week when I had Big Kon on, he did mention that right now he really wants to work for ROH. I asked him out of all the
Yeah.
companies, where would he like to work with? He
Yeah.
praised pretty much all the companies. He said he'd love to work anywhere, but he's got his eyes set on ROH now. Is that something that you've got your eyes set on as well?
Yeah, I think when it came down to it, like a while ago, when we started kind of trying to figure out what we wanted to do and where we wanted to go, I know my sights immediately were just on Ring of Honor and the Briscoe brothers. Um, there was just I don't know how to say it. I've always loved their work. I've watched them ever since they started. You know what I mean? When they were just two kids in singlets, basically. I can remember that was some of the first ROH tapes I ever saw, and seeing where guys like that, what they've done, and what they've done for Ring of Honor and stuff like that, and two, just knowing that they're awesome. Those were like the first names that popped into my head that I was like, I really want to go work them. And I can remember there was one night I was sitting here watching TV and I almost started getting mad because I just wanted to work with them so bad. I was watching a match with them and I wasn't as familiar with the guys they were working with. And and there was nothing wrong with the match, but I was just like, man, I'm like mad because I'm not the one in there working with them right now. You know what I mean? So hopefully it's been a work in progress that has kind of come and gone over the last while. So hopefully it's not far gone and still within our future. So, but that's definitely one of our main goals. So.
Yeah, I would love to see the Awakening in ROH, and I think you guys would have a fantastic match with the Briscoe brothers. And not only
Yeah.
that, we've seen so much unity in pro wrestling, like New Japan,
Yeah.
Impact, AEW all working together. Sooner or later, I feel like ROH is going to enter that bubble, and if you guys are there around that time, that opens us up to even more possibilities and more dream matches. So,
I would hope so,
yeah.
because that's like my other big dream was to go back to Japan, because like I did a tour there at the end of 2004, and it was just one of my favorite, like most special memories ever in wrestling still to this day. And it's always kind of killed me that I've never been able to go back, because like New Japan, man, I was a kid just straight out of the indies. Like I'd, wrestled for Stampede and a couple other, independent companies at the time. And there was nothing crazier, to me than getting on a plane to fly all the way to Japan. And then I got on a bus, like I got picked up on a bus, and all of a sudden there was somebody interviewing me for a magazine. And I almost didn't know what to say because I was just in such a training, like just a wrestling mode. Like it was just the training we had gone through. Like I'd trained almost every day for a month. And, that was for the last month before going on top of all the other months beforehand. I had never even thought about an answer for an interview at that point in time. I was just so shocked that somebody was sitting there to interview me, because I was like, "What? Why are you asking me questions?" I was sitting on a bus with Josh Barnett, Scott Norton, and Daniel Bryan. So, you know what I mean? I was like, "Why are you talking to me?" But
Yeah.
yeah, that's like kind of our main two goals right now.
Yeah, and you were on that bus with Josh Barnett. We briefly spoke about Harry Smith, who recently had a really good fight with John Moxley over at Bloodsport 5. Would
Yeah.
that be something that would ever interest you, like stepping into GCW and doing something similar to that?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm that tough anymore. I'd need to really up my game again to be able to do that. Like, it's just it's a different mindset. And I used to enjoy that wrestling a lot. Like, that was how I spent a lot of my time training for Japan and stuff like that. And with, and like, I really respect it. I almost rather watch that sometimes more than, I guess, everything else, just because it is so much more sport, you know. So I would never say never, but I would definitely have to get myself back in the right mindset to enter that ring. So
Yeah, of course. I think that'd be very interesting, and I've really enjoyed what they've been doing so far.
yeah,
And no, I honestly think professional wrestling is a business that will always be thriving because so many people want to find success in it.
yeah.
So, as a professional wrestler in training myself and many other pro wrestlers in training who are listening to this, what advice would you give to anybody entering the business?
Some of the best advice I ever got was from Dr. Tom. And am I allowed to swear on here?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Okay. It basically goes, you better get used to eating shit and you better learn to like it. Because anybody getting into wrestling, especially in my viewpoint, if you love wrestling, because I've seen it too many times, and if that's why you're getting into it, you're going to have a shit sandwich served to you for a very long time. So you kind of got to get used to the taste of it. And granted, I think nowadays maybe the culture might have changed a little bit. Like I know the times that I've kind of been out in the world within the last year or so, it seems, I think the world of professional wrestling is becoming a lot more of a positive place. And there's a lot of the um, negative is kind of gone, I guess. Like a lot of people see the wrong in that. And I know I came up with a generation who is kind of in between where like you could see the good that came out of the bad, and you didn't kind of let the bad become you more or less. um, but that's something you always got to think of. You need a real tough skin in wrestling, especially if your dream is to be in WWE. I'd said to a kid, I said it to Wheezy, because he came down with me to Atomic Wrestling last week. And I said to him, like, kind of in WWE, there was about 5 years where I spent being told I wasn't who I was. And nothing seemed to be good enough until all of a sudden who I was good enough one day for a little while. And then who I wasn't good enough again, for another few years. And that's really hard to deal with, because honestly, like if you're a performer and you're there because you like it, and I would say the same with many, many other people that I've traveled with and trained with and had the pleasure of sharing this trip with. You just get stripped away, and if you're lucky, you get built back up again. You know what I mean? But it's a process that it kind of never ends. Not everybody, and I wouldn't say this didn't happen to a guy like AJ Styles, but like you're always, even AJ's kind of had to reinvent himself, even though he's just himself. Like, you know what I mean? Many, many times. And it's like that with anybody else. There's not, even Taker wasn't the exact same Undertaker for, the last 25 years. So, um, those are things, you really need to do. Um, when I got in, all the books that I was reading or all the interviews I was watching, everybody said I had a backup plan, which is pretty important because I've never had one. And that's like one of those terrifying thoughts sometimes. Like, I'd already wrestled for about 7 years by the time I went to Louisville and OVW. And it was the first time I ever thought maybe I'm not going to make it. Like, and I remember just being like, oh shit, I don't have a backup plan. What am I going to do if I don't make it? And then I spent 3 years in OVW and didn't get hired. And I went home for a year and I didn't know what to do. Like I was back in Canada, freezing again in the winter, hating life. And almost a whole year went by until I got hired again, and that happened, in a moment where I was giving up at the same time. Like I was so angry in the moment of that interview where I got hired that it was pretty amazing that I got hired, in all honesty. So it's, wrestling's a really tricky, fickle business. You're going to see a lot of things that probably really piss you off, because there's going to be people that like make it who you'll never be able to explain why. Like, why does that person make it? They're not better than me. I've made it past people who I've said that guy's 100 times better than me at everything. I'm the one that made it and they didn't, you know. So, you know, there's just a lot of things that come into play, and it's all a lot of mental game, you know. You really have to have a strong mind and just be able to like keep forging forward, you know, and you got to stay healthy. That's also one of the hardest things, you know. A lot of kids nowadays, they get hurt before they can, you know, even get anywhere. And so you got to really be smart and you got to take care of yourself. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's some fantastic advice. And you did touch on having a strong mind, and on wrestling with awareness, mental health awareness has always been a topic of conversation. So if you're comfortable with sharing, have you ever struggled with your mental health, and what advice would you give to people who are listening?
definitely. I mean, oddly enough, I only kind of just discovered possibly the root to some of my own mental problems. But it took a lot of work. Like, you know, there was like wrestling can be very depressing because it's not very rewarding a lot of the times. Like, I think Santino once said, you know, there's a lot of moments in wrestling that are just for you. Like, you're the only one who remembers your high moments most of the time because they come so fast. They come and go super fast, and your low moments are like always kind of up here. Because if you're not doing, you know, what you want to do or how you feel like you should be used or whatever, like it's very hard not to be depressed. So, I mean, one of the things I've kind of always had to do is like I have to make myself move forward. Like that's always been one of the biggest things. Um, like people would be surprised to know, like when me and Konnor won the NXT tag titles, it was a really shitty day. Like there wasn't anything positive that day for us going into that match. So as surprising as that might sound, like it wasn't a good time mentally. And so at that point in time, we were struggling with a lot of things. And when Konnor was really down, I would have to kind of snap myself out of it to kind of snap both of us out of it. And, you know, we kind of became just like a teeter totter in that way. Like we were a scale. Like this guy, one of us was down, one of us was up, trying to work, you know, help the other one. And so that was a balance a lot until we both wound up being way too depressed to even do that for each other anymore. And at one point, I finally looked into meditation, and so then I did a lot of exploring with that until I found one that was kind of right for me, or what I felt was right for me, and that really helped for a while. But like as it went on, wrestling just kind of kept breaking me down again, and so even in like the last couple of years with the time off, I've had to do a lot of, I guess, what they call inner work, but more or less just by looking inside. I've kind of found what's led me to the path to get to the better place that I'm in now. And I wouldn't say that's going to be the same for everybody because my path is so weird of even how I wound up kind of where I am mentally now. You know, when you go from reading Batman comic books most of the time to now I can't stop listening to Ram Dass or reading Ram Dass. It's a little two different worlds, but like I remember just feeling, because I used to always use stuff like that to escape. Like just my brain would always be eating away at myself for, you know, whatever. Like this sucks. I'm not happy doing this. I'm not happy with this. Like there was just nothing happy. So like, hey, let me go escape into something that, you know, does make me happy. But I was escaping for so long that in the long run, it didn't wind up helping because no matter what, I'd escape and come back and everything was still the way it was, you know, 20 minutes, half an hour before. And so for me, luckily, I think through meditation really, really helped. And it's taken, like, it's funny because like once I started, I was pretty good for a couple of years. And then just before we got released, I was kind of in the midst of moving and everything was kind of so busy for a while that I kind of like fell off my practice. And once I fell off my practice for so long, I started to really notice just I was getting bad again. Just my brain was getting negative again all the time. Um, even if it was a day where I was happy, I could lose that happiness in like a heartbeat for next to no reason whatsoever. And I really hated that. Like that was just something that I couldn't live with. Like I was just like, I don't want to feel this way. Like I'm 40 years old now. Life's not that bad. I know it's not that bad. And like even when we were on the road, like every day I would be telling myself, like, you know how lucky you are to be here doing what you're doing, because I'd done everything else on my way up there, to know how lucky I was, but I just didn't feel it. And luckily through, I think my practice and kind of everything that I've gotten into in the last while, it's really helped my mental state like a lot. I've let go of so much anger, so much negativity, and things that were just constantly bogging me down. And like it doesn't all come from meditation. Like I've had to do a lot of work and a lot of thinking and learning from a lot of really great minds, that kind of help you see how you do these things to yourself. You know what I mean? Like, sure, there's a lot of outside influences, but us focusing on it and always carrying it with us doesn't make it better. You know what I mean? It just makes it worse and worse and worse. And I had to let go of all that. And honestly, like my mental stability has increased like 100-fold. And I've had to, in the past year or two, I've had like a lot of friends who are suffering from the kind of the same thing. Like wrestling can be very, very depressing for people. And I think through that, I've been able to kind of help some of my friends out, that, in ways that, when I talk to them afterwards, I'm like, how did I get any of this knowledge? I don't really know, but it seems to be, seems to be working. You know what I mean? Cause I have such a bad short-term memory. Like it upsets me because like if I read something and I'm like, I want to remember that. Well, I've got to read it about 100 times and say it out loud 100 times so that I can remember it, and that's a frustrating thing to do. So whenever I'm actually able to recall these things and bring forth a little bit of knowledge that I may or may not have, I don't know. It feels pretty good. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on the wrestling business being a bit depressing at times. For people entering the business, do you think there's anything they should be conscious of coming in that could maybe help avoid some depression?
Uh, I don't know, because there's a few people that I would say were really good examples in when we were in like NXT or FCW, and I won't name names, but like I had somebody's first match, back in FCW, and I was already like stressed out, depressed, whatever at that time because I was struggling to find who I was. And there was one kid who was an amazing athlete, always super positive, and like I can just remember before the match, like he just kept coming over and he was like so full of energy, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I'm probably annoying you," and I was like, "No, it's okay." I just hope that you can still feel this way when you get to the point that I'm at right now. I go, because it's awesome to see that you feel that way. And then 4 years later, I walked into a locker room and saw him lose it. You know what I mean? And I pointed it out to him. I said, "Oh shit, you lost it." I said, "That took a lot less time than I thought." So, I mean, wrestling's just really hard. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. And I don't, I mean, there's really nothing you can do other than just follow what's right for you. You know what I mean? Wrestling's going to be hard because you're usually not in control of everything you want to be in control of, and you're going to have to do things that maybe you don't want to do or you don't like doing. And I mean, you just have to let it all go. That's pretty much all it. If you really love wrestling and it's what you want to do, you're just going to have to let go of a lot of things. You wind up doing silly things. You wind up doing stupid things. You wind up doing embarrassing things. It's like, it's wrestling. We're a carnival sideshow of a million different things. So it's just you're going to have to keep a positive mindset a lot, just to know where you're going and what you're getting out of it. Like, you've got to be able to find the enjoyment in everything you do. So that's kind of like the biggest part of it. You're going to get probably yelled at. You're going to get told you suck. You're going to get told nobody wants to work with you or something like that. Like, all of these points, unless you're the next God's gift to wrestling somehow. But even all those guys, you're going to deal with shit. So you just got to be ready to deal with it. I've sat there with, one of the top guys in the world today when we were in a class, and what was being explained to us, we were doing, and he was told that he wasn't doing it. And we couldn't figure it out. It was the most frustrating thing in the world. It caused a fight with our coach because we couldn't figure out what the fuck was wrong. You know what I mean? And all he did was get mad at us, and we didn't learn from anything. And that can happen, anywhere, any place, to anybody in wrestling. It's just, it takes a lot of tough skin. So
Yeah, of course. And you talked about like dealing with a lot of shit, especially from fans. As a public figure, as someone who's been in the business for a while, I'm sure you've gotten your fair share of hate on social media. How do you deal with that? Because I'm sure that can be detrimental to someone's mental health.
I mean, I'm fairly blessed, I would say. Like, we were pretty lucky because after kind of going up, our fans stayed our fans, and the people that hated on us weren't really our fans to begin with. And I mean, there was only, like, if I got something stupid, or if I see something that like sets me off on social media or whatever, I usually just block it. I just ignore it. I just let it go like anything else, because most of those people, they've got their own problems, and that's why they're even saying that shit to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, I could sit around and be negative all day too. Trust me, people have heard me do it, and I'm at least funny when I do it. But I'm not going to sit there. There's just no need. Like, our world's got enough shit going on, and you know what I mean? Like, if people were more concerned with doing good than they are about making somebody else's day suck because their boss yelled at them, or they've got something shitty going on, like I used to say in OVW, so I had this one friend who's a monster of a man, and I remember him saying to me, like, bro, sometimes it really gets me, these fans, the things that they say to you, it just bothers me, it irks me. This was a big dude, and he wasn't a kid. He was a big man. He'd been around the world. And I looked at him and I said, you realize these people come here and they yell the shit at us that somebody's given to them all day at their jobs. You know what I mean? Like, when you're the bad guy in wrestling, we're the outlet for all the fans. Like, we're the bosses that they hate. We're the bullies that picked on them in school today. Or, you know what I mean? Just the jerk that cut them off on the road. Like, that's what the bad guys are in wrestling. So I've always been able to deal with that fairly well. It's never really affected me that much. Like, I'd say there's been a time or two where maybe like I woke up one morning and there was a ton of tweets just being like, these guys suck, or they're even on TV or whatever anymore. And like, that sucked, but you move on with your day. I never respond to it. There's no point in validating it because that's what people are looking for. I don't know. And there's no point in validating more negativity. We got enough out there.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have enough out there, and conflicting that negativity, coming at it with some positivity, because you are a very successful individual. So I'm curious to know, how does Vic keep a positive mindset and stay motivated?
Meditation is one of my big ones as of late. Just gotten so much back into it, and it was funny because when it's like weird because like I've known about meditation my whole life. There was millions of things that I heard about kind of my whole life, and I don't feel like the time when I grew up and I was interested in certain things, there wasn't enough available. And thankfully, the world today has the abundance of knowledge that is, it's almost overwhelming to me, because in a way, during, like, once the pandemic hit, like, my mind did such a big mental shift, of just wanting to get rid of the things bringing me down, just, you know, just being negative to me. And I was just able to find so much stuff nowadays of people that inspired me, and just listening to them talk and listening to, their journeys, and all of this is too, it's outside wrestling. I really listen to not much having to do with wrestling nowadays. I've heard a lot of people's stories, and, like, granted, I do listen to that stuff, but my mind, when I'm not wrestling, I'm kind of not thinking about wrestling, because I'm just, like, I guess, like how Ram Dass says, lately I'm just here now, and that's what I'm doing. Like, I felt bad because I did an interview last night. The guy's like, "So what's next for you?" And I honestly couldn't remember that I had a match coming up in a month. You know what I mean? Because I was just in the interview at that moment. And so the minute we were done recording, I was like, "Oh, I totally forgot to talk about that." I said, "You even asked me, but, like, I can't really think ahead a lot of the times, because I'm just kind of doing my best sitting in what I'm sitting in." You know what I mean? I've finally gotten myself into a good place right now. And so I know that there's good things coming, and I know that, like, Konnor and myself are both working towards these things. Um, but it's odd, because, like, it's just, I go about my day doing what I'm doing, and either today I'm going to go wrestle and train and have a good time, or, but I'm not, I don't know, I'm not focused on it, type of thing. Like, it's being focused and unfocused, I guess, at the same time, which is a very unique mind space for me, I guess, because, like, things kind of drift in and drift out, and when they come, it's good, because, like, 2 years ago, if I thought about wrestling, everything was negative. It was always a negative memory, and I think that was kind of what started the process of where I'm at now, was because I was like, come on, like, after 20 years in the business, I shouldn't only be able to look back and think of negative things, but those were what I guess really stung a lot, were so many of the negative moments. And I was like, I want to let all of that go. And so being able to do that has made such a huge difference, because now I do look forward to wrestling, and I look forward to, like, what's to come. Like, before, I would look at it and say, well, if it's not happening right now, it's just not going to happen. And, like, that was just the negativity of it, which is kind of an honest truth in wrestling. Like, sometimes things, you can talk about them forever, but until you're doing them, it's not happening. And, I used to be a half empty, glass is half empty kind of guy. Like, oh, if it's not happening, it's not going to happen. Well, a ton of shit still happened all the time. It just takes forever to get there. And, patience has been quite the virtue for me over time. And so now that's just kind of where I try to stay within, is like, if I focus too much on something that I really want to do and it doesn't work out, then I get sad, I get depressed, and I got to go through the whole trip again of, like, oh, it didn't work out this time. It's to where now it's just like, it'll happen or it won't. So either I do the things that I can to make things happen, or I don't. Like, it's one or the other. So it's kind of the best way I can put it.
Yeah, really living in the moment, right? Just focusing
Yeah.
on the then and now. Absolutely. Yeah. So that wraps up the questions, but I do like to play a quick game with all my guests before I let them go. So I'm going to list 10 names, and you can use one word or sentence to describe each of them.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to kick things off with Corey Graves.
Can I use 2 words?
Yeah, of course. A word or a sentence.
Pleasantly cynical.
Pat. Yeah.
I was just going to say, he's kind of like my spirit animal in that way. I literally just laughed at a a post of him listening to a terrible joke from Claudio right before we started this, and his face was doing the exact same thing mine was. So yeah.
Man, of course. Pac.
Oh, awesome. And that's an understatement. Awesome.
Yeah, he's incredible. William Regal.
No one has made me laugh so hard in the locker room.
Really?
Yes, he put me in tears telling his story one day. It's just amazing. So, amazing storyteller. No, that's what I'd say for Regal.
Kenta.
Cemento.
Tyson Kidd.
The best. What's that?
Yeah. Davey Boy Smith Jr., aka Harry Smith.
Toughest son of a bitch in the world. Jesus.
Yeah, he really is.
Oh, yeah.
Bo Dallas.
That's another tough son of a bitch. One word. I mean, that guy's a light. That's all I can say. He is a light bulb with the fire inside of it. Like that's it.
Yeah. We'll take it back to the dungeon days with Bruce Hart.
I just think headbanger, because that's what Bruce used to call everybody as he was doing his thing. Oh, this headbanger, that headbanger.
Yeah. Ross Hart.
The first thing that popped in my head is Cinderblock head, because he has a very square head, and at one time Johnny Devine made an action figure which was just a drawing of Ross Hart on a Cinderblock. So, but he was awesome. I love Ross.
Yeah, of course. And last but not least, your tag team partner, Big Kon, aka Konnor.
Oh, Big Orc. I mean, there's too many words. I don't have one word other than my brother. 100% my brother, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've been through too much together.
Yeah, of course. So I'm very excited to see your guys' future as the Awakening. Hopefully we can get that match at the Briscoes in ROH.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to what you guys have in store. Where can everybody find you on social media?
Let's see. My social media is Vic_the_Space Lord, and that's at both Twitter and Instagram. And that's basically it for me on that one. Yeah, because that's all I got social media wise. So if you want to see what I'm not posting or what I posted last week, go check it out. Most of the time it's just coffee, or I don't even know what else I've posted lately. Advertisements for our shows coming up.
Of course. So I thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just wrestled the mind with Vic, aka Viktor. Last week we did have Big Kon, aka Konnor, on, so check that out if you haven't already for both interviews of The Awakening, aka The Ascension. Thank you all for tuning in, and peace out, guys.